This is my partner, Carter Whitworth. Welcome to the Film Theorists, Arlington High School's movie review show. We are reviewing A Woman Under the Influence, directed by John Cassavetes, released in 1974.
A Woman Under the Influence immerses the audience into the dysfunctional household of Nick and Mabel Longjetti. The story revolves around their tumultuous relationship as Nick struggles to cope with Mabel's mental instability affecting everyone around them.
All right, personally, I really enjoyed this movie. I was kind of nervous about it in the beginning because I didn't know if like a movie from the 70s could hold my attention for 2.5 hours, but honestly I was kind of engaged the whole time, and I really enjoyed the way that they portrayed mental illness kind of from both of them, and I feel like it was just very well written and well done. I think the actors did a great job of kind of portraying how it really looks, you know.
Yeah, I agree with most of that, but I think that it's not really enjoyable in the way that most people would enjoy a movie, because there are a lot of cringy parts, and the movie is just very uncomfortably raw, and it really puts you into the situation of this family. And there are a lot of parts where you really you feel like, oh, this is bad for Mabel, and it gets uncomfortable. And I mean, there's a lack of music, and a lot of the camera shots, you know, it really immerses you into this situation. And towards the end, it kind of comes together, and you see what it's really trying to say, and so you get some kind of satisfaction out of that. But I wouldn't say that most people would enjoy it.
No, I actually totally agree with you. I feel like it's definitely a selective taste, especially in this time. I feel like when it came out, it might have reached a lot more people, but I do agree with you, especially in the dinner scenes where it was just such there's so much uncomfortable silence. You're just kind of sitting there
Yes.
Stop talking, stop. But I think that, personally I enjoyed it, but I agree with you where I don't think that it's for everybody. It's not for everybody.
I think the strongest point of the entire movie was Gina Rowland's performance. I think it really shows what mental illness can be in a real situation, and she has a great way of using her face to show all these different emotions, especially some kind of formation of bipolar disorder where, you know, her face, you can really see that in her face. And I think that's super interesting and kind of creepy.
She did amazing, dude. I was watching the movie and I was there the whole time. It was like she was really just there. And she made her character so likable too. I feel like it was just you felt so bad for her, but it was stop. It was oh, poor girl, she's going through all of this stuff. And she did an amazing job at portraying, someone that's so real, and you love her, but
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, on to the implicit meanings. I think the implicit meaning was more towards the fact where it's being controlled by the people around you will really, affect the way you act. And I feel like in this movie, it's her husband mainly, she's under his influence essentially. I feel like she's kind of out of it the whole movie and kind of, weird, but I feel like the only time she begins to get really crazy and she starts to hum and dance around is after she gets in a fight with Nick. And she enters this dazed and disassociated state, and she stays there until Nick hits her or something and snaps her out of it. And throughout the whole movie, Nick repeatedly says things be yourself, don't conform, be who you are. But then the minute she acts like she does, he gets mad at her and tells her, no, that's not what you're supposed to be doing. And he just puts her in these uncomfortable situations and gets mad when she doesn't know how to react. And I think it's really noticeable in especially the last dinner scene, and then Mabel asks her dad to stand up for her after Nick scolds her and she feels uncomfortable. She doesn't like the way he treats her, but doesn't feel strong enough to fight back on her own.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. Adding on to what you said about influence, I think a central implicit theme in A Woman Under the Influence is how an individual's identity and self are inevitably warped and molded by the expectations of society and the precepts of social conformity. Throughout the film, we notice that Mabel has this, this profound connection with children, especially towards the end of the movie when her own children help her calm down. Implicitly, this theme represents the lost psychological freedom of being a child, a blank slate without substantial influence from society. Mabel is berated to be yourself, as you said, but society has clouded her own self-perception. So, how do you think that this movie portrays mental illness in a way that's different from a way that we see it today?
I think it shows it in a... It's a good question, because I feel like we see mental health as something that's very, almost I feel like today we normalize it in a way that it's like they don't acknowledge that some people have a really, really hard time living with it as much as they do in this movie, where in this movie it's like, it shows how it affects everybody. Like, you feel bad for Mabel, but you also feel bad for her kids. You see the way her kids, run to her defense, and they're so scared of everything that's going on, and I feel like it does a really good job at, showing the aspects of how everyone is affected by a family member's mental health. Whereas today we kind of focus more on the sole person and we don't consider how it, affects the greater scheme.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that.
For the question I have for you is, do you think that her husband is also kind of crazy?
Yes, definitely. I think, sometimes when you're around someone who's, has a mental illness, it can kind of really get under your nerves, and I think it's kind of like pulling some strings under him that maybe he hasn't figured out on his own. And so you really start to see like the parts of his character that you wouldn't normally see that Mabel brings out in him. Yeah. So Mabel has kind of like bipolar disorder, a little manic depressive, and he's a little he has anger issues.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Mabel really brings out those anger issues, and I think one of the other themes in this movie is that we're all a little crazy in some instance. So I think that's a great question, Amber.
Thank you.
So that wraps up our review of A Woman Under the Influence. Now, do we think it's worth a watch?
I'm going to give it a thumbs up.
Me too.
I'm going to give it a thumbs up. All right. Thank you, Carter.